James Rourke, a veteran who survived the Iraq battlefield, sought peace in the Blackwater swamp, but was mistaken. After setting up camp by the water's edge with his German shepherd, Shadow, the loyal dog began acting strangely, barking fiercely at the thick fog, scratching the ground, and whimpering with an inexplicable urgency. It wasn't afraid of the dark, but seemed to be warning of something lurking deep within the swamp. Trusting Shadow's instincts, James followed it into the night, until they found a rotting wooden cabin swallowed by tree roots, its door ajar, with steam rising from inside, as if someone were still alive. What secrets are buried beneath the cold ground of Blackwater? Please support us by subscribing to our channel. James Rourke drove his old pickup truck down a winding dirt road in Louisiana, where cypress trees draped over inky black water. A weathered wooden sign appeared, Blackwater Swamp. The smell of mud, moss, and decaying leaves mingled with suffocatingly heavy mist. In the back seat, Shadow, the German shepherd, growled softly, ears perked. 2 years after leaving the military, carrying scars and memories that never rested, James chose this remote place to escape the world. He set up camp by the water's edge, among cypress trees draped in gray moss. Night fell quickly, fog spilling from the swamp, cold and damp. James brewed coffee on a gas stove, while Shadow lay nearby, eyes vigilantly peering into the mist. Near midnight, the dog suddenly leapt up, barking loudly, pulling hard on its leash toward the swamp. Instinct made James grab his gun and follow Shadow, wading through cold black water. Amid the thick fog, a decaying wooden cabin emerged, slanted roof, moss-covered walls, porch tilting into the water. The door was ajar, a breeze carrying the sharp, metallic smell of rust, like dried blood. Shadow whimpered softly as James gripped his flashlight and stepped onto the first wooden stair. Inside, the cabin was so dark that the flashlight's beam looked like a thin thread hanging in the heavy air. James nudged the door. The hinges screeched, then fell silent. He paused to let his eyes adjust to the darkness. The room was a single space, low-ceilinged, with moldy gray wooden walls and a leaking roof dripping steadily onto the floor. The air reeked of rot, damp and heavy, like something buried too long. Under the flashlight's beam, he saw a wooden table in the room's center, a broken chair tipped beside it. The table's surface was thick with dust, but a long streak had been wiped clean, as if something had been placed there and removed. The floor was the same, thick dust disturbed, revealing dried boot prints mixed with wet mud streaks. James crouched, touching a footprint near the window, still soft, not fully dried. He glanced at Shadow. The dog was sniffing along the wall's base, nose inhaling deeply, body tense as a bowstring. The air inside made James feel he wasn't truly alone, as if he'd stepped into a place belonging to someone or something else. He swept the flashlight around the room. On the opposite wall were deep, crisscrossing carvings, like symbols, in no language he recognized. Some were circles within triangles, interspersed with jagged lines, like ancient script. Many spots were stained with dark brown splotches. He lightly touched one. It was dry, rough, like long-dried blood. Below the wall, the heavy wooden table was covered with tattered papers, rotting books, and an old map, its paper crumbling, edges curled. One corner of the map bore dark blood splatter, spreading like a dead flower. James lifted the map, brushing off dust. The faded words, Blackwater Swamp, sat at its center, surrounded by 12 red circles, drawn in ink, or blood, connected by scribbled lines, like a spider web. Beneath each circle was a number and a symbol, perhaps coordinates, perhaps religious markers. He folded the map, a chill running down his spine. There was something in how those circles were connected, as if they formed the shape of a snake swallowing its own tail. Shadow whimpered, claws scratching hard at the wooden floor. James turned, shining the light toward it. The dog was focused on a spot near the room's corner, where the flashlight revealed parallel scratches. It clawed relentlessly, the sound of nails clicking against hard wood. James approached, crouched, and tapped the flashlight on the floor, a hollow echo. Part of the floor was hollow. He searched, finding a slightly raised plank with a gap just wide enough for his folding knife. He pried with force. The plank popped up with a crack, revealing a dark space the size of a small chest. The smell of rust and mold rose, heavy with stagnant water. James leaned in, shining the light. An old iron chest lay still below, its paint peeled, the metal pitted and rusted. He reached down and pulled it up. The chest was heavier than expected, its surface ice-cold. The lock was broken, only a warped hinge remaining. James pried the lid with his knife handle. It sprang open, the metallic clang echoing in the confined space like a suppressed sigh. Inside were several film reels wrapped in worn canvas bags, a small vintage projector, and faded black and white photos. He picked up a photo. The flashlight's beam cutting through thick dust revealed a blurry image. A group of people in a circle in the swamp, all wearing animal masks, holding torches. In the circle's center lay something motionless, unclear if it was a person or a corpse. James held his breath, flipping to another photo, only torchlight shadows cast on massive cypress trees, like walls. He set the photos down, questions flooding his mind. Why were these here? Who left them? And what happened in these waters? Shadow suddenly growled softly, turning toward the window. James instinctively switched off the flashlight, holding still. Outside, the thick fog shifted slightly. A figure passed faintly, but clearly human. It lingered long, as if staring inside, then vanished. James stayed motionless, hearing the roof drip, his own breathing. When he switched the flashlight back on, the window showed only fog, but a faint, wet handprint marked the frame, freshly pressed from outside. James rushed out, the flashlight sweeping through the dense fog surrounding the cabin. Everything was eerily silent, only the faint hum of insects and water, dripping from branches into the swamp. He scanned everywhere, searching for any sign of the figure that passed the window. The light stopped on a muddy patch in front of the porch. Clear, fresh boot prints led toward the forest, then vanished. They were larger than his, with a serrated sole pattern, military or hunting boots. James knelt, touching the print's edge. The mud was soft, wet, water still seeping back in. Whoever it was had just left. He looked toward the forest, but the fog swallowed everything. No sound, not even frogs, as if something had silenced them mid-croak. The air was thick, heavy with the cold, fishy smell of moss and mud. James gripped the flashlight tightly. Part of him wanted to chase, part warned he was in a place where no one would hear a cry for help. He hesitated a few seconds, then turned back. As he reached the porch, the first thing he saw froze his blood. The cabin door was wide open. He was certain he'd closed it when he rushed out, but now it swung lightly in the breeze, as if someone had entered and left. The flashlight swept inside. Everything seemed untouched. But James felt a clear difference. The air carried a new smell, smoke and damp earth, sharper and heavier than before. He stepped in, shadow following silently, hackles raised. Under the trembling light, the walls still bore the old symbols, but on the opposite wall, above where he'd touched earlier, a new symbol appeared. It hadn't been there before. Deeply carved, fresh wood shavings on the floor showed it was just etched with a knife or sharp tool. It resembled a snake coiled around a circle, its head open as if swallowing its tail. The carving was still damp, sticky to the touch. The metallic tang of blood hit him. James stepped back, eyes fixed on the symbol. A chill spread from his neck down his spine. Someone had been inside while he was out. Shadow whimpered, circling the room, nose pressed to the floor, stopping by the chest. The lid was still closed, but James saw fresh mud marks beside it, as if someone had knelt there, touched it. He looked around. The window was still ajar, the frame soaked with dew, the table unchanged. But the sense of someone just leaving lingered, like breath not yet dissipated. James closed the door, bolted it. He knew he should leave now, but it was fully dark. The path back to camp, through treacherous waters. He decided to wait until morning, when the fog lifted and there was enough light to drive out. He pulled the intact chair to the room's center, back against the wall, gun on his lap, flashlight off to save battery. The cabin sank into darkness. Only the wind whistling through the planks. Occasionally, the roof creaked, echoing like slow footsteps above. Each time, Shadow raised its head, growling low, eyes fixed on the room's corner. James petted its head, feeling his heart pound. Outside, the fog thickened, the sound of water rippling beneath the floorboards like someone circling the house. He checked his watch. The second hand crawled. Past midnight. Shadow suddenly stood, facing the door, letting out a long snarl. James grabbed the gun, standing. The barking echoed out, then abruptly stopped, leaving a stifling silence. Outside, somewhere in the forest, a strange sound rose, not animal, not human. It was like a sigh blending with the wind, faint but steady, as if waiting. James gripped the gun, eyes locked on the darkness beyond the slightly open window. A faint light flickered on the water's surface, source unclear, shimmering then fading. He didn't know if someone was out there, or if the swamp was toying with human eyes. The sun rose weakly through the fog, pale light filtering through dense cypress trees and spilling into the cabin in long, murky streaks. James barely slept, still in the same spot, gun in hand, eyes sunken from staying awake. Shadow lay close, ears toward the window, ready to spring. Everything was unnaturally quiet, as if the swamp held its breath. James inhaled deeply, trying to dispel the lingering smell of damp rot. When the light was enough to see dust particles floating, he decided to check the one thing still nagging him, the iron chest under the floor. He dragged it to the room's center. Rust flaked off the lid, forming red patches like dried blood. He pried the old hinge with his folding knife. The metal screeched, then the lid popped open, fine dust billowing. Inside wasn't household items as he'd guessed, but a jumble of old things wrapped in decaying waxed cloth. He lifted each package, unwrapping carefully. There were 3 8mm film reels, yellowed, each marked with red ink, 1, 2, 3. With them was a small vintage projector, heavy metal body, rusted crank but sturdy. At the chest's bottom was a stack of black and white photos, edges singed and stuck together from long dampness. James peeled them apart, eyes glued. In one, a group stood in a circle in shallow water, holding torches, faces hidden by masks, shaped like snake, goat, and bird heads. In the circle's center was a cloth-covered object, human-shaped, limbs limp. Another photo, closer, amid the firelight, someone knelt, hands raised with what looked like a long knife. Their mask bore a circle symbol carved on the forehead, identical to the new carving on the cabin wall from last night. His throat went dry, hands trembling as he held the final photo, a lone wooden cabin in the swamp, roof sagging, porch tilted, the very cabin he stood in. At the chest's bottom, he found a folded note, handwritten in smudged ink. Blackwater must be kept silent. Blood is the price. The writing was scrawled, ink smeared like tears. James carefully folded it, tucking it into his jacket pocket. Sweat beaded on his forehead, despite the chill. He felt like he'd opened a door others had fought to keep buried. Shadow stood near the door, fur bristling, eyes fixed outside. The dog whimpered, tail low, a sign it sensed something wrong. James closed the chest, deciding to take everything to the truck, to get it out before anyone returned. He carried the chest with both hands, dragging it over the slick porch, morning light glinting off the dull iron, making it look like a small coffin. The air outside was thick with mist, the smell of mud suffocating. The path from the cabin was shrouded in fog, visibility less than 20 meters. James cautiously approached the pickup, parked by the tree line. As he neared, he froze. Something was off. He circled the truck, eyes scanning the dusty metal. Then he saw it. a small circular dent on the door's side, paint chipped, exposing bright metal. He crouched, touching it. The edge was sharp, deeply indented. A bullet mark, a small caliber round, fired from a distance, meant to warn, not kill. James looked around, heart pounding. The swamp was silent, only the wind brushing the water. No one in sight, but the feeling of being watched was so strong his neck burned. He returned to the cabin, eyes scanning the trees. Cypress shadows formed hundreds of eerie shapes, as if someone stood among them. Shadow growled softly, staying close. James loaded the chest onto the truck bed, locked it, and opened the driver's door. His hand stayed on the gun, eyes never leaving the rearview mirror. The thick fog made the view behind a blurry gray-white haze. He lowered the window, listening. No sound, no engine, no footsteps. But as he leaned forward, a small, sharp sound rang out, metal lightly hitting the truck's roof. He stepped out, checking. On the roof lay a small brass bullet, tip slightly dented. Someone had fired a warning from afar, deliberately leaving the bullet as a message. James picked it up, gripping it tightly, eyes scanning the swamp. No wind, no movement, only the fog like a blanket over the water. He knew he wasn't just being watched, he was marked. Someone knew he'd opened the chest, seen its contents. He tossed the bullet aside. It hit the water with a faint plop, like a raindrop. In the thick silence, he was certain that staying another night would bring more than warnings. James closed the truck bed, started the engine, but instead of the familiar roar, it sputtered weakly and died. He tried again. Nothing. Dead, as if gutted. A chill ran down his spine. He stepped out, popped the hood, and checked. The fuel line was cleanly cut, the slice precise, clearly done with a professional tool, not an animal, human. He looked up, scanning the swamp ahead. The fog still blanketed everything. Sunlight choked into a pale, directionless glow. Then, through the mist, he saw a man standing across the water. About 100 meters away, the figure was clear, tall, thin, in a long silver-gray cloak, head covered by a wide-brimmed hat, glinting unnaturally in the dim light. The man stood still, not moving, staring straight at James. His eyes were unclear in the fog, but the gaze was so piercing, it threw James's heart off rhythm, cold, deliberate. He didn't hide, didn't flee, as if he wanted to be seen. James froze for seconds, pistol in hand. "Who's there?" he shouted, voice hoarse in the empty air. No reply. Only the echo lingered, and the soft lapping of water against trees. The man in the silver hat stayed still. Then, without warning, he turned and walked into the fog, his form dissolving as if swallowed. James ran instinctively, slogging through mud. But when he reached the spot, only faint footprints remained in the water, some moss floating. No tire tracks, no paths leading away. Just water, deep and cold. He stood there, breathing hard, ears straining for any sound. Far off, the swamp returned to silence. Black birds gathered on treetops, croaking harshly, then scattered. James stepped back, realizing this place wasn't just abandoned, it was guarded. That man wasn't a stray wanderer. He knew James was here, and he wanted James to see him. James returned to the cabin, carefully gathering what remained, the film reels, photos, the note, all wrapped tightly in his jacket. He locked the door with a chain, a futile reflex, and returned to the truck. It wouldn't start, but he could walk to town, about 6 miles by his recalled map. The fog was thick, but daylight made an ambush less likely than at night. Shadow stayed close, occasionally glancing back at the cabin, its eyes glinted with an almost human alertness. The trail out of the swamp wound between cypress rows, water lapping at their feet. James walked slowly, gun in hand, senses sharp. Every sound behind, a drip of water, a snapping twig, made him spin around. But no one was there. When he reached the main dirt road, he stopped, breathing heavily, looking around. About 300 meters away, where the swamp opened, he caught a silver glint flashing through the trees. Not a clear figure, just a flicker of light. This time, James didn't chase. He stared long, until it vanished completely. He understood that if the man wanted him dead, last night's warning shot wouldn't have been just a warning. They were playing a psychological game, scaring him, pushing him to leave, or drawing him deeper. Either way, he needed to know who he was facing. As the road climbed to drier ground, the air shifted. Insect hums faded, replaced by distant engine sounds and faint gasoline, signs of Blackwater town, the only place with a gas station and store for miles. James slowed, still glancing back at the swamp. The fog had thinned, and in the clearing where the cabin loomed, he thought he saw the silver-hatted figure again, blending with the trees. Just a glimpse, but enough to make him shudder. He was still there, watching. James gripped his backpack strap, his silhouette fading into the afternoon sun and red dust of the dirt road. Resolved to leave this place safely, he needed to uncover what Blackwater truly was, and who guarded the secrets beneath its black waters. The town of Blackwater emerged after nearly 2 hours of walking. A small cluster of faded wooden houses scattered along the main dirt road. Outside, the air was still heavy with swamp humidity, but here there were at least human voices, the smell of coffee, and faint diesel fumes. James stopped before a weathered sign reading, "Welcome to Blackwater, population 418, the letters nearly consumed by moss. The main street stretched only a few hundred meters, with a gas station, a general store, a bar, and a small building marked sheriff's office. People stared as he passed, not with curiosity, but suspicion. A hunched man pumping gas paused, spat on the ground, and turned away. 2 women talking outside the store fell silent, their eyes darting away as he walked by. James felt an invisible chill surrounding him. He entered the general store, the door swung open, a bell jingling. Inside, dim yellow light spilled over old wooden shelves, the air thick with coffee and damp wood. The storekeeper, a middle-aged man with tanned skin and a cloth cap, was counting change. He looked up at James, then silently resumed, pretending to be busy. "I've got some questions," James said. "About the old house in the swamp, down by Lower Blackwater." The man paused, looking up again. His eyes flickered with tension, then turned wary. "You mean the cabin in the deep swamp?" "Yeah." "How long's it been abandoned?" The man gripped the cash tightly, shaking his head. "No house out there. That area's off limits too, Marshy. Nobody lives there." James leaned on the counter, staring directly. "I was there last night. Someone was watching me. I found a chest with film reels, photos, stuff you should see." The storekeeper inhaled sharply, glancing around the empty store. "I don't want to hear about that, friend," he said, voice lowering. "If you're smart, you'll turn your truck around and leave. Blackwater doesn't welcome strangers digging up old stories." He turned away, pretending to arrange goods. James pursed his lips, grabbed a water bottle, left a few coins on the counter, and walked out. The air outside grew heavier. Those who had watched him now avoided his gaze. At the street's end, James saw the small wooden building with the sheriff's office sign. He decided to try his luck. Inside, the cramped office smelled of coffee and old paper. A county map hung on the wall, red dots marking the swamp. Behind the desk was a young female deputy, late 20s, dark skin, hair neatly braided, uniform tidy but worn. She looked up as he entered. "Sorry, the office is temporarily closed," she said, her voice carrying a soft Creole accent. "I just need a few minutes." James set his bag on the desk. "Name's James Rourke. I came from the south, staying near the swamp. I found an abandoned cabin, and..." She cut him off, eyes narrowing. "Which swamp?" "Blackwater Swamp. I camped near it by an old cabin." She paused as if weighing each word. "You should leave that place. Today. It's not safe. Nobody's allowed there." "Why?" James asked. "Someone was following me, and I found some strange things." "You're a cop. You should know what's going on out there." She stood, voice low but firm. "I know, but you don't understand. Some things here have been buried a long time. Call it Local history. Don't dig it up. James opened his bag, pulling out the photo from the chest. He slid it toward her. A group in masks, standing in the swamp. What does this mean? Mariah glanced at it, then recoiled, fear flashing in her eyes. Where'd you get that? In a chest hidden under the cabin floor. There's more. Film reels, papers. I think they're tied to a cult or some ritual. She clenched her fists, glanced around, and pulled the curtain shut. Put it away, she whispered. Don't let anyone see. I thought you were a cop. I am, she replied, voice trembling slightly. But I'm also from Blackwater. I know when to stay quiet. If you're smart, you'll pack up everything you found and get out of this county. Don't go back to the swamp. James studied her, surprised by the genuine fear in the young woman's eyes. You know what's happening out there, don't you? Mariah was silent for a moment, then spoke softly, almost to herself. Some people never leave, even after they're dead, and some lie just to keep them quiet. Her words hung heavy in the room. James tucked the photo back into his bag. If I give you these film reels, what can you do? She looked at him, shaking her head slightly. No, I can't take them. If you hand them over, we're both in trouble. Take them far away from here. She walked around the desk, opened the door, letting noon light flood the room. Leave, Rourke. Don't let anyone know you talked to me. Their mask bore a circle symbol carved on the forehead, identical to the new carving on the cabin wall from last night. His throat went dry, hands trembling as he held the final photo. A lone wooden cabin in the swamp, roof sagging, porch tilted, the very cabin he stood in. At the chest's bottom, he found a folded note, handwritten in smudged ink. Blackwater must be kept silent. Blood is the price. The writing was scrawled, ink smeared like tears. James carefully folded it, tucking it into his jacket pocket. Sweat beaded on his forehead, despite the chill. He felt like he'd opened a door others had fought to keep buried. Shadow stood near the door, fur bristling, eyes fixed outside. The dog whimpered, tail low, a sign it sensed something wrong. James closed the chest, deciding to take everything to the truck, to get it out before anyone returned. He carried the chest with both hands, dragging it over the slick porch, morning light glinting off the dull iron, making it look like a small coffin. The air outside was thick with mist, the smell of mud suffocating. The path from the cabin was shrouded in fog, visibility less than 20 meters. James cautiously approached the pickup, parked by the tree line. As he neared, he froze. Something was off. He circled the truck, eyes scanning the dusty metal. Then he saw it. A small circular dent on the door's side, paint chipped, exposing bright metal. He crouched, touching it. The edge was sharp, deeply indented. A bullet mark, a small caliber round, fired from a distance, meant to warn, not kill. James looked around, heart pounding. The swamp was silent, only the wind brushing the water. No one in sight, but the feeling of being watched was so strong his neck burned. He returned to the cabin, eyes scanning the trees. Cypress shadows formed hundreds of eerie shapes, as if someone stood among them. Shadow growled softly, staying close. James loaded the chest onto the truck bed, locked it, and opened the driver's door. His hand stayed on the gun, eyes never leaving the rearview mirror. The thick fog made the view behind a blurry gray-white haze. He lowered the window, listening. No sound, no engine, no footsteps. But as he leaned forward, a small, sharp sound rang out, metal lightly hitting the truck's roof. He stepped out, checking. On the roof lay a small brass bullet, tip slightly dented. Someone had fired a warning from afar, deliberately leaving the bullet as a message. James picked it up, gripping it tightly, eyes scanning the swamp. No wind, no movement, only the fog like a blanket over the water. He knew he wasn't just being watched, he was marked. Someone knew he'd opened the chest, seen its contents. He tossed the bullet aside. It hit the water with a faint plop, like a raindrop. In the thick silence, he was certain that staying another night would bring more than warnings. James closed the truck bed, started the engine, but instead of the familiar roar, it sputtered weakly and died. He tried again. Nothing. Dead, as if gutted. A chill ran down his spine. He stepped out, popped the hood, and checked. The fuel line was cleanly cut, the slice precise, clearly done with a professional tool. Not an animal. Human. He looked up, scanning the swamp ahead. The fog still blanketed everything. Sunlight choked into a pale, directionless glow. Then, through the mist, he saw a man standing across the water. About 100 meters away, the figure was clear. Tall, thin, in a long silver-gray cloak, head covered by a wide-brimmed hat, glinting unnaturally in the dim light. The man stood still, not moving, staring straight at James. His eyes were unclear in the fog, but the gaze was so piercing, it threw James's heart off rhythm, cold, deliberate. He didn't hide, didn't flee, as if he wanted to be seen. James froze for seconds, pistol in hand. "Who's there?" he shouted, voice hoarse in the empty air. No reply. Only the echo lingered, and the soft lapping of water against trees. The man in the silver hat stayed still. Then, without warning, he turned and walked into the fog, his form dissolving as if swallowed. James ran instinctively, slogging through mud, but when he reached the spot, only faint footprints remained in the water, some moss floating. No tire tracks, no paths leading away. Just water, deep and cold. He stood there, breathing hard, ears straining for any sound. Far off, the swamp returned to silence. Black birds gathered on treetops, croaking harshly, then scattered. James stepped back, realizing this place wasn't just abandoned, it was guarded. That man wasn't a stray wanderer. He knew James was here, and he wanted James to see him. James returned to the cabin, carefully gathering what remained, the film reels, photos, the note, all wrapped tightly in his jacket. He locked the door with a chain, a futile reflex, and returned to the truck. It wouldn't start, but he could walk to town, about 6 miles by his recalled map. The fog was thick, but daylight made an ambush less likely than at night. Shadow stayed close, occasionally glancing back at the cabin, its eyes glinted with an almost human alertness. The trail out of the swamp wound between cypress rows, water lapping at their feet. James walked slowly, gun in hand, senses sharp. Every sound behind, a drip of water, a snapping twig, made him spin around. But no one was there. When he reached the main dirt road, he stopped, breathing heavily, looking around. About 300 meters away, where the swamp opened, he caught a silver glint flashing through the trees. Not a clear figure, just a flicker of light. This time, James didn't chase. He stared long, until it vanished completely. He understood that if the man wanted him dead, last night's warning shot wouldn't have been just a warning. They were playing a psychological game, scaring him, pushing him to leave, or drawing him deeper. Either way, he needed to know who he was facing. As the road climbed to drier ground, the air shifted. Insect hums faded, replaced by distant engine sounds and faint gasoline, signs of Blackwater town, the only place with a gas station and store for miles. James slowed, still glancing back at the swamp. The fog had thinned, and in the clearing where the cabin loomed, he thought he saw the silver-hatted figure again, blending with the trees. Just a glimpse, but enough to make him shudder. He was still there, watching. James gripped his backpack strap, his silhouette fading into the afternoon sun and red dust of the dirt road. Resolved to leave this place safely, he needed to uncover what Blackwater truly was, and who guarded the secrets beneath its black waters. The town of Blackwater emerged after nearly 2 hours of walking. A small cluster of faded wooden houses scattered along the main dirt road. Outside, the air was still heavy with swamp humidity, but here there were at least human voices, the smell of coffee, and faint diesel fumes. James stopped before a weathered sign reading, "Welcome to Blackwater, population 418, the letters nearly consumed by moss. The main street stretched only a few hundred meters, with a gas station, a general store, a bar, and a small building marked sheriff's office. People stared as he passed, not with curiosity, but suspicion. A hunched man pumping gas paused, spat on the ground, and turned away. Two women talking outside the store fell silent, their eyes darting away as he walked by. James felt an invisible chill surrounding him. He entered the general store, the door swung open, a bell jingling. Inside, dim yellow light spilled over old wooden shelves, the air thick with coffee and damp wood. The storekeeper, a middle-aged man with tanned skin and a cloth cap, was counting change. He looked up at James, then silently resumed, pretending to be busy. "I've got some questions," James said. "About the old house in the swamp, down by Lower Blackwater." The man paused, looking up again. His eyes flickered with tension, then turned wary. "You mean the cabin in the deep swamp?" "Yeah." "How long's it been abandoned?" The man gripped the cash tightly, shaking his head. "No house out there. That area's off limits too, Marshy. Nobody lives there." James leaned on the counter, staring directly. "I was there last night. Someone was watching me. I found a chest with film reels, photos, stuff you should see." The storekeeper inhaled sharply, glancing around the empty store. "I don't want to hear about that, friend," he said, voice lowering. "If you're smart, you'll turn your truck around and leave. Blackwater doesn't welcome strangers digging up old stories." He turned away, pretending to arrange goods. James pursed his lips, grabbed a water bottle, left a few coins on the counter, and walked out. The air outside grew heavier. Those who had watched him now avoided his gaze. At the street's end, James saw the small wooden building with the sheriff's office sign. He decided to try his luck. Inside, the cramped office smelled of coffee and old paper. A county map hung on the wall, red dots marking the swamp. Behind the desk was a young female deputy, late 20s, dark skin, hair neatly braided, uniform tidy but worn. She looked up as he entered. "Sorry, the office is temporarily closed," she said, her voice carrying a soft Creole accent. "I just need a few minutes." James set his bag on the desk. "Name's James Rourke. I came from the south, staying near the swamp. I found an abandoned cabin, and..." She cut him off, eyes narrowing. "Which swamp?" "Blackwater Swamp. I camped near it by an old cabin." She paused as if weighing each word. "You should leave that place. Today. It's not safe. Nobody's allowed there." "Why?" James asked. "Someone was following me, and I found some strange things." "You're a cop. You should know what's going on out there." She stood, voice low but firm. "I know, but you don't understand. Some things here have been buried a long time. Call it local history. Don't dig it up." James opened his bag, pulling out the photo from the chest. He slid it toward her, a group in masks standing in the swamp. "What does this mean?" Mariah glanced at it, then recoiled, fear flashing in her eyes. "Where'd you get that?" "In a chest hidden under the cabin floor. There's more. Film reels, papers. I think they're tied to a cult or some ritual." She clenched her fists, glanced around, and pulled the curtain shut. "Put it away," she whispered. "Don't let anyone see." "I thought you were a cop." "I am," she replied, voice trembling slightly. "But I'm also from Blackwater. I know when to stay quiet. If you're smart, you'll pack up everything you found and get out of this county. Don't go back to the swamp." James studied her, surprised by the genuine fear in the young woman's eyes. "You know what's happening out there, don't you?" Mariah was silent for a moment, then spoke softly, almost to herself. "Some people never leave, even after they're dead, and some live just to keep them quiet." Her words hung heavy in the room. James tucked the photo back into his bag. "If I give you these film reels, what can you do?" She looked at him, shaking her head slightly. "No, I can't take them. If you hand them over, we're both in trouble. Take them far away from here." She walked around the desk, opened the door, letting noon light flood the room. "Leave, Rourke. Don't let anyone know you talked to me. And don't trust anyone in this town." James stood still, giving her one last look. Mariah's eyes were stern and sad, like someone who'd seen too much she couldn't speak of. He nodded and stepped outside. The humid southern air hit him, laced with swamp scent. In the distance, Blackwater's residents moved slowly, heads down, silent. As he passed, they paused, stared, then turned away. At the street's end, a breeze stirred, and for a moment, he thought he saw a silver glint from the trees, like the silver hat of the mysterious old man. James squinted, but there was only sunlight and thin mist. He gripped his bag strap, turned away, heart heavy. He knew he hadn't escaped Blackwater. He'd only stepped deeper into it. James rented a small room on the second floor of the town's only inn, a faded yellow building with a long porch overlooking the main road. The room was cramped, with an iron bed, a wooden table, and a slow-turning ceiling fan. He locked the door, drew the curtains tight. Shadow lay by the door, eyes outward, ears up like alert antennas. James set the bag on the table, opened the old iron chest, and took out the 3 8mm film reels and projector. His hand still bore scratches from prying the chest, dried blood crusting around his knuckles. The chest's rusty smell lingered, tainting the air like decaying time. He wiped dust from the projector lens, plugged it in, and carefully threaded the first reel. The projector started with a hoarse hum, gears squeaking, then a faint beam hit the dingy white wall. Flickering images appeared, a swamp. Water glimmered with torchlight, figures moving around a clearing among towering cypress trees. The camera shook, as if the operator hid behind a tree. In the frame, dozens stood in a circle, wearing black robes, faces hidden by animal masks. At the center was a large stone, like an altar, draped in white cloth stained with blood. One figure stepped forward, holding a long, gleaming knife. Torchlight reflected off the blade, casting a cold, fire-like glow. The projector clattered, and James felt his heart pound with the reel's rhythm. It had no sound, but the images were clear enough to tense him. 2 others dragged something from the dark, a human body, bound tightly, head slumped. Light grazed bare skin, a blood-soaked gag over the mouth. The knife wielder raised their hand, the blade flashed, then plunged. The screen flickered, breaking into white specks, then slowly cleared. On the white cloth, blood spread in dark streaks under the old film's light. James gripped the chair's armrest, throat dry. He'd seen death on the battlefield, but this was different, ritualistic, deliberate, driven by a sick belief in every motion. The projector rolled on, the scene shifting quickly. Another figure entered the frame, unmasked, wearing a U.S. military officer's hat. The light was dim, but clear enough for James to lean forward, heart tightening. On the figure's right sleeve, a mud-stained patch stood out under the firelight, bearing the name E. Quinn. He stopped breathing. The name hit like a punch to his memory. Major Ezra Quinn, his commander in the Special Forces unit in Iraq, who led them through Fallujah, reported missing after an explosion in 2007, declared killed in action. James remembered his face, cold eyes, clipped voice, thin smile when giving orders. In the film, the man with the patch stood by the altar, unmasked, staring at the camera as if knowing he was watched. He touched the blood on the cloth, then whispered something to the knife wielder. The image froze there, then shifted. The group wrapped something in a sack, carrying it through the fog, shadows stretching over the water like a funeral procession. The reel ended with a wooden gate carved with a snake, swallowing its tail, identical to the cabin wall's symbol. The projector's gears clattered a moment longer, then stopped. A blinding white light hit the wall, and the room fell silent. James sat still, breathing heavily. In his mind, E. Quinn's image mixed with old memories, sandstorms in Ramadi, crackling radios, and the commander vanishing after the blast. He'd believed him dead. But now, evidence glared. At some point after the war, Quinn was in Blackwater, part of a killing ritual. James stood pacing the room, head buzzing. Shadow remained by the door, eyes following him, ears twitching as if sensing something off. James gripped the table's edge, steadying his breath. His body was slick with sweat. Unsure if from heat or fear, he shut off the projector, rewound the film, and placed it back in its case. On the reel's cover, faint handwritten text read, 1969. Original. He froze. 1969. Impossible. Quinn couldn't have been in a film shot before he was born. James turned on the desk lamp, examining each frame closely. Everything bore age: the grain, the flicker, the date notation. Yet the officer's face, though blurry, was too familiar. Not just similar, it was him. Same forehead, same cold eyes, same faint smirk. He recalled Mariah's words, "Some people never leave, even after they're dead." A terrifying thought crept in. Either Quinn never died, or what he saw in the film didn't belong to the linear time he understood. He closed the chest, locked it, and slumped into the chair. Outside, dusk fell, fog creeping from the swamp. From the window, he saw streetlights flicker on weakly, and far off. At the street's end, a figure stood by a pole, head under a wide-brimmed hat, glinting silver. James blinked, looked again. The figure was gone. Shadow growled softly, eyes fixed in that direction. James drew the curtains, mind in chaos. He now understood that what he was touching wasn't just a forgotten crime, but a cycle spanning generations. And somewhere out there, Ezra Quinn, his former commander, or someone wearing his face, was still watching his every step in Blackwater. James left the town at dawn, heart heavy, as if weighed by stones. He didn't speak to Mariah again, only left a brief thank you before driving toward the dirt road leading to the swamp. The truck rattled, tires sinking into wet mud. Blackwater's dampness felt like a giant cold hand tightening around him as the town receded. The swamp's fishy stench returned, carrying the scents he'd never left. As the old cabin appeared through the misty haze, James felt his breath catch, not from exhaustion, but a vague premonition. Something was wrong. The path bore fresh tire tracks, deep and heavy, the mud still wet. Someone had been here while he was gone. He slowed, hand on the gun on the seat. Shadow whimpered, fur bristling. As the truck stopped before the cabin's porch, James knew his instinct was right. On the rotting wooden door, in large, scrawled letters, was a freshly dried message in dark red. "Don't open the past. Blood, not paint, not ink." He knew the smell: rusted iron, fishy, warm. The writing stretched from the door's center to the porch floor, hastily scrawled, as if written in anger or fear. James stood frozen, a mix of cold and anger rising. Someone knew he'd taken the chest, watched the film, and now sent this as a warning. He stepped forward, lightly touching the letters. The blood was still sticky, not fully coagulated. Whoever wrote it had left only an hour or two ago. He spun toward the tree line. The fog had thinned, revealing calm black water. No one, no sound, but the wind hissing through cypress branches. Shadow suddenly growled, charging toward the porch's corner. It sniffed the ground, whimpering. James followed, and on the step, where moss was scratched, a small metal object glinted in the weak sun. He picked it up, an old military badge, brass edges scratched, an eagle in the center, with Unit Recon 19th, Rourke inscribed. He flipped it. Crudely etched on the back were two letters. CM James froze. Stood for Corporal Michael Connor, his teammate in Fallujah, who vanished the same time Ezra Quinn was declared dead. Connor, a tough, quiet scout, was the only one in the unit James fully trusted. He still remembered that night: the explosion, smoke, screams, then silence. Waking in a field hospital, he was told Connor and Quinn were dead, their bodies unrecovered. Yet here was Connor's badge, right outside a Louisiana cabin door. James gripped the metal, fingers whitening. His breath quickened, heart pounding. Old memories flooded back. Night marches, vague orders, humanitarian missions, he later learned covered experimental operations. Once, Connor had whispered, "We're not saving anyone, James. We're burying something." He'd brushed it off as tired complaints. Now those words echoed from deep underground. James inhaled sharply, stepping onto the porch. The cabin door was ajar, creaking in the breeze. He pushed it open. Inside, no one, but everything was disturbed. The table was shifted. Maps he'd left in the corner now scattered on the floor. The walls were still damp, but in the upper corner, A new symbol was drawn in the same blood, two parallel lines crossed by a circle. He recognized it. The old Recon 19th Unit insignia, worn on their sleeves in Iraq. Someone was saying, "We're on the same team." But why in blood? James stepped outside, eyes tensely scanning the forest. A flock of crows shot up, their harsh cries echoing. The wind over the water carried a blade-like chill. He pocketed the badge, returned to the truck. On the steering wheel, he noticed a small folded paper tucked under the wiper. His heart jolted. He pulled it out, opening it with 2 fingers. Scrawled in the same pen from the chest, "We're still here, don't let it be reborn." No signature. The paper smelled of cigarette smoke. James glanced around, seeing only thick fog. He tucked the note with the badge. Pieces were falling together. Quinn, Connor, the cult, the 1969 films, all linked in a warped chain of space and time. His former teammates were now shadows or lurkers in Blackwater's dark. He looked at the door's message one last time. "Don't open the past," feeling it spoke directly to him. But he knew it was too late to stop. Once truth is seen, closing your eyes doesn't make it vanish. James climbed into the truck, Shadow jumping in. The engine roared, gasoline burning heavily in the silent air. He glanced in the rearview mirror. The cabin faded in the fog, the blood message dim but visible. At the mirror's edge, a figure flickered among the trees, silver-hatted, motionless. James didn't look back, just pressed the gas, the truck lurching through muddy ruts, carrying the cold weight of a warning turned to fate. Night fell faster than usual. A fine rain poured as James returned to the cabin, blurring the water and turning the dirt road to slush. He propped up the shifted door, bolted it, and stacked logs on the porch as a makeshift barrier. In his mind, images of Connor's badge and the blood message swirled, mixing with Ezra Quinn's face from the film. He sat by the window, cleaning his gun, the flashlight casting his shadow long on the wall. Shadow lay by the door, still as stone, but growled softly each time wind rattled the roof. The air was thick with anticipation, as if the swamp itself held its breath. Near midnight, a sharp crack sounded outside the porch, small but enough to snap James's eyes open. He didn't turn on the light, only gripped his gun, peering through the window's slit. In the blurry rain, figures moved, 3, maybe 4. They advanced slowly, almost gliding over the water. His flashlight swept across, catching black masks, distorted like animal heads. James took a deep breath, signaling Shadow to stay quiet. The door trembled, then stopped. Absolute silence. He heard water dripping from the eaves, wind hissing through wall cracks, and amid it, a soft footstep squelching behind the house. He leaned back, catching a shadow flit past the broken window. Combat instinct surged. He sprang up, grabbing the pistol from the table, just as a knife stabbed through the wood. The plank splintered, shards flying. James dropped, rolling aside, and fired. The shot rang sharp, its flash lighting the night, gunpowder stench rising. The shadow at the window froze, collapsing heavily into the mud. The other 2 charged, slamming the door, hinges tore free, the plank crashing down. James retreated behind the table, using a wooden shelf as cover. Shadow lunged, barking deep and fierce. A masked figure burst in, wielding a shotgun. James fired first, the bullet hitting the shoulder. A muffled scream rose behind the mask. The second figure returned fire, the bullet grazing the wall, whizzing past James's ear, sending dust and wood raining down. The cabin erupted in chaos. The flashlight's beam flickered, breaths heaved, rain pounded the roof, mixing with gunpowder and mud's acrid smell. James backed to the room's corner, waiting for footsteps to close in. As a shadow peered over the shelf, he kicked hard, slamming the figure's chest, sending them crashing down. Shadow pounced, biting the arm. A scream erupted, blood splattering the floor. James grabbed the other's shotgun, firing twice. Both figures collapsed. Silence flooded the cabin. broken only by rain and shadows panting. James stood still, heart pounding chaotically. The smell of smoke and blood mixed with damp wood. He knelt by one attacker, lifting the black mask. The flashlight revealed a pale face, stubbled, eyes rolled back. James recoiled, speechless. It was Deputy Bill Harper, glimpsed that morning outside the sheriff's office, standing behind Mariah during their talk. He checked the wound, a bullet through the chest, piercing thin armor. Harper was still gasping. James grabbed his collar, shaking him. "Who sent you? Talk." Harper's mouth opened, blood spilling, eyes staring blankly. "You shouldn't have come back. Rourke." His voice was hoarse, broken. "They know you watched the film." His last words choked off, head slumping. James let go, body icy. Outside, thunder roared, lightning tearing the sky, illuminating cypress trees like giant bones around the cabin. He circled to the back door, scanning. No one else. 2 bodies lay on the porch, rain washing over their black masks, making them look like rotting wooden statues. The night's darkness blanketed the swamp, but James felt an unseen gaze watching from afar. He returned inside, barred the door, and dragged the table across. A cold truth formed. This town wasn't just silent from fear, it was part of it. The police, the people, even those he thought were bystanders, all knew and stayed quiet. Blackwater wasn't forgotten. It was guarded. James wiped blood from his hands, eyes vacant. Shadow lay by his feet, silent, occasionally glancing at the door. He sank into the chair, gun within reach. In his mind, Ezra Quinn's face reappeared, alongside Deputy Harper's cold, dying gaze. They were on the same side, part of the same group, and somehow, those who served with him in the military were now guardians of Blackwater's secrets. Another thunderclap shook the air, rain pouring harder, as if the sky wanted to erase what had happened. James knew tonight was just the beginning. If these 3 were sent to test him, others would follow, and they wouldn't warn again. He didn't wait for dawn. He grabbed essentials, gun, film reels, badge, map, and pulled Shadow from the cabin as rain fell heavily. The swamp was pitch black, water glinting with lightning. Thunder rolled thickly, mixed with the winds moaning through hollow trees. James knew he couldn't take the main road. They'd be waiting. He veered onto a western trail, wading into floodwater. Each step was dragged by mud. Shadow led, chest deep in water, ears up, navigating like a living compass. Behind, flashlight beams flickered through the trees, shouts rising then fading. They'd found the cabin. James crouched, pulling Shadow behind giant roots. Rain thickened, fog, mixing with mist into a white veil. The air reeked of mud and rotting leaves. Insects buzzed, then something heavy splashed into the water. Maybe a branch, maybe someone tracking him. They kept going until the lights behind them completely vanished. After nearly an hour, James realized he'd ventured deeper into the heart of the swamp, where trees grew tangled and water rose nearly to his waist. In the midst of it, hidden under the shade of ancient cypress canopies, a small wooden shack appeared. It leaned heavily to one side, roof punctured, walls covered in moss. Beside it was a narrow, dilapidated wooden bridge leading to higher ground. James scanned the area. No sign of people, no smoke or light, only the sound of rain hammering the broken tin roof. He signaled Shadow, and they stepped onto the bridge, the wood creaking but holding their weight. Inside, the shack was dark, reeking of damp rot and bat droppings. James swept his flashlight around. A toppled table, scattered rotting papers on the floor, and a wooden rack holding what looked like a dust-covered old map. He approached, brushing away cobwebs, and lifted the paper. Beneath a layer of green mold, faint lines emerged. A map of Blackwater's infrastructure, crisscrossing paths like a network of routes. In the legend, shaky handwritten ink read, "Subterranean Channels, established 1943. Below in bolder text, connects all ritual sites. Only the key holder knows the way out. A chill ran down James's spine. The map's boldest lines led to a circled area in the center, marked in red ink. A faint note beside it, nearly faded, required him to lean close to read. Ritual, the 13. The place where souls sleep. He stood still, rain pounding the roof, each drop like a countdown. Ritual, the 13. Something clicked in him. The 12 red circles on the blood-stained map from the cabin. So where was the 13th? The one never shown, and now it sat at the center of this map. Shadow sniffed, growling softly. The dog stood near the door, fur bristling. James turned, sweeping the flashlight outside. In the rain, a figure seemed to pass through the forest, vanishing behind a large root. He switched off the light, signaling Shadow to stay still. Moments later, silence. He returned to the table, where rotting papers clung to the surface. Some lines emerged under the faint light, penciled notes, almost like a diary. He read softly, voice lost in the rain. They said it would end after the 12th ritual, but the serpent hasn't slept. Blood still flows, and the dream repeats. The newcomer thinks they're digging a well, but they're digging a path to hell. The words were rushed, some faint, some bold, ending in a long, jagged period. In the paper's corner, stuck to the wood, was a dried black blood stain. James glanced around, feeling the words echo in the space, blending with the rain. Ritual 13, an unfinished ritual, or one about to repeat. He folded the map, tucking it into his jacket. Lightning flashed outside, illuminating a plank carved with symbols like those in the first cabin, circles, coiling snakes, strange glyphs. This shack was likely one of the cult's outposts, where they kept maps linking the entire swamp. Suddenly, a creak sounded from under the floor. James froze, shining the light down. A loose plank revealed a dark gap below. He knelt, prying it with his knife. A small paper fell out, nearly disintegrating from dampness. Only a few words were legible. 13 people, none survived. The door will reopen when the badge bearer returns. James went still. The badge bearer, he thought of the metal badge with CM in his pocket. Connor. Had Connor come back here? Or was he the one to restart the 13th ritual? Thunder rumbled long, shaking the shack's frame. James tucked the wet paper into his notebook, glancing at the door. Darkness was thick, but in a distant flash, he saw a flickering light among the trees, a fire or flashlight. Shadow's low bark startled him. They'd been found again. James doused the light, pulling open the small rear window. "Let's go," he whispered. Shadow leapt out, landing in the mud. James slid after. Just as the front door burst open, wind whipping the map on the table, he glanced back, seeing a figure pass the door, their flashlight sweeping wildly. They ran through slick trees, water splashing to their faces, shouts echoed behind, a sharp gunshot ringing out, the bullet grazing a tree. James ducked low, running toward a narrow channel deeper into the swamp. They stopped only when sure the pursuit was gone. Rain had eased, but fog remained thick, James's breath blending with the white mist. He stood in the floodwater, clutching the map, mind reeling. Ritual 13. The place where souls sleep echoed in his head, like a call from the swamp's depths. Somewhere beneath his feet, deep in Blackwater, something waited to be awakened. The sky turned gray as James and Shadow waded through the last cypress row, soaked and exhausted. They hid under a massive cypress, its roots thick as arms, coiling like giant snakes. James panted, sweat and rain mingling, still gripping the map from the shack. He didn't know where to go, only that returning the way he came meant death before he could question anyone. The swamp was eerily silent. Then a strange sound rose behind. James snapped his gun up, aiming at the source. "Easy, Rourke," a familiar voice cut through the fog. A small figure emerged, flashlight low, face lit yellow. Mariah Duplessis. Her hair was wet, sheriff's uniform mud-stained, eyes wary but resolute. "What are you doing here?" James growled softly, gun still low but not lowered. "You think you're the only one they want dead?" she replied, voice dropping. After you left town, someone came to my office. Didn't say a word, just left a mask and a bullet on my desk. I got the message. She paused, scanning around. I followed to find you. They're hunting us both. James squinted. You know what's going on, don't you? Mariah nodded slightly. Part of it. And I think you've touched it too. She motioned him to follow, leading through the flooded forest to another shack, hidden behind dense trees. This was my father's hideout before he vanished, she said, opening the door. Inside, the dark, moldy space was tidier than others James had seen. On the table were old files, yellowed covers, and maps on the walls. Your father was a cop? James asked. He was a county detective over 30 years ago. Mariah pulled a file from a drawer, placing it before him. He investigated a group called Children of the Serpent. They've been here since the 1940s, posing as a revivalist religious sect. Really, they're a cult practicing human sacrifice, believing victims' souls protect the land from ruin. James flipped through the file. Dusty black and white photos showed victims, men, women, children. Below were dates: 1954, 1962, 1978, 1991, all missing around Blackwater Swamp. No bodies were ever found, she continued. Reports were sealed, no one allowed to dig deeper. After the last case, my father vanished. They said he killed himself, but I know he didn't. James looked at her, then spread the shack's map on the table. Look, he said, pointing to the red circle in the center. I found this last night. They call it Ritual X13s, the 13th ritual. Mariah leaned in, eyes flashing with alarm. God, my father mentioned it in his journal. He said the final ritual was never completed. The cult leader died mid-ceremony in 1969. They stopped gathering openly but never disappeared. James recalled the film, The Swamp Ritual. Ezra Quinn's face, the E. Quinn patch clear. He recounted every detail. When he finished, Mariah sat silently, gripping the table's edge. You're sure, Quinn, the military officer? Absolutely. He was my commander in Iraq. But the film was from 1969. Mariah exhaled hard, pacing. Then they're not just a cult. They've got military hands, government hands. My father said Blackwater wasn't just a swamp, it was a test site. The government worked with the cult to study spiritual energy from collective souls. He never proved it. But now, she looked at the map, voice dropping. You just brought the proof. James leaned back, sighing. I saw them last night, masked men, armed. I took down 3. One was your deputy. Mariah froze, then nodded, unsurprised. I figured the whole town's involved, or scared silent. Harper, I saw him take envelopes at night. She went to the cabinet, pulling out a crumpled envelope. Inside was a typed list, paper yellowed. This is from my father's files. Names of the missing over 50 years. James scanned the lines. Farmers, workers, discharged soldiers, even a pastor. Beside each name was a symbol, circle, triangle, or snake. At the list's end, a name choked him. Corporal Michael Connor. He looked up, voice low. Connor, my teammate. Went missing the same day as Quinn. Mariah nodded, eyes heavy. My father believed they were chosen, carrying blood or souls from past generations, reborn to continue the rituals. James gripped the paper, scanning the shack. Rain pattered on the roof. If you're right, the 13th ritual is coming, and someone wants me in it. Mariah met his gaze, speaking softly. Now you see why I told you to leave, but you're in too deep. They won't let you go, and I've got no way back either. James's eyes hardened. Then we go forward. You've got info, I've got what they want. We can make Blackwater talk. She gave a sad, defiant smile. You're crazy, Rourke. Maybe, but I've survived hell before. This swamp can't be worse. Mariah nodded faintly, blowing out the oil lamp. In the dark, the rain outside grew heavier, and Blackwater cloaked 2 people plotting to expose a half-century nightmare. Mariah left the shack the next morning to search for remaining files at the sheriff's office. James stayed, copying the map and missing persons list. He told her to return before dark. She nodded, driving off in a small off-road vehicle, leaving him and Shadow in the thick fog. As her vehicle vanished, James scanned the silent forest. He felt an odd sensation, as if the swamp itself was holding its breath, waiting. The afternoon dragged. He and Shadow stayed in the shack, checking the gun, reloading, and securing the film reels in a chest-strapped canvas bag. As dusk fell, Mariah hadn't returned. James tried calming himself. She might be stuck in town due to flooded roads. But old dread spread like ink in water. He turned on the shack's old radio, hearing only static. No signal, no response. Night fell, wind rising with a familiar metallic swamp stench. James stepped outside, scanning the fog-draped swamp, trees dense as walls. Shadow growled softly, nose pointing toward the narrow path to the main road. A faint sound rose, a distant engine, then silence. Then a small beep from the radio on the table. James rushed in, grabbing the receiver. Static crackled. Then a low, gravelly male voice, Rourke. James froze, throat dry. "Who's this? You know who I am." A pause, then a small distorted laugh through the signal. "It's been a while. I hear you found something of mine." "Ezra Quinn," James said softly. Each word heavy as lead. "Very good. Still recognize my voice after all these years." "Impressive." His tone was calm, mocking. "I think we can make a deal." James gripped the receiver. "Where's Mariah?" He chuckled. "Brave girl. Curious like her father. But curiosity, you know, is the deadliest sin here." "Listen, Quinn," James growled. "If she's hurt, you'll what? Call the cops?" Quinn cut in, voice lowering. "They all work for me, or those above me." "You've got no one to call, James, just me." His steady breathing hissed through the speaker, mixed with dripping water, as if he stood outside, near the swamp. "You have the films," Quinn said. "I want them. All of them. No copies, no negotiation. Bring them to Blackwater Cemetery, the old graves at midnight, alone. If you're on time, she lives." James clenched his jaw. "If I don't, you'll hear a gunshot. And when the sun rises, the swamp will take her like the others. You understand?" His voice faded, then cut off. Static returned, then silence. James set the receiver down, hands trembling slightly. His mind swirled, Quinn's cold face in the film. The victim list, the words Ritual 13. Quinn wanted the films, the last evidence to expose it all. And he knew James would come, because there was no other choice. He switched on the flashlight, turning to Shadow. "We've got work to do." The dog lifted its head, yellow eyes gleaming in the dark. James unpacked the canvas bag, checking weapons, 2 handguns, 4 magazines, a folding knife, and an emergency flare. He wrapped the films in plastic, stowing them in a waterproof backpack. He studied the Blackwater tunnel map, marking the cemetery on the eastern edge, the 13th red circle, Ritual 13, the place where souls sleep. The sky outside stirred with wind. Frog calls ceased, replaced by droning insects and distant thunder. The swamp seemed alive, shifting under the fog. James turned off the light, leaning against the wall, closing his eyes for seconds. In his mind, Quinn's voice echoed, calm, confident, like a general moving troops. He opened his eyes, gaze icy. "No, Ezra. I'm not following your orders anymore." He stood, gathering everything. Before leaving, he scattered papers on the table, enough to make someone think he'd taken all the evidence. He pulled a tarp over, hiding footprints, then signaled Shadow. They left as the moon glimmered faintly. James followed a narrow channel, cold water cutting into his skin. Each muddy step was a stride toward a past he'd tried to forget. Wind carried a distant echo, like a chant in an unknown tongue. He wasn't sure if it was real or memory, but it chilled him. "What are you, Quinn?" James asked, voice hoarse. "My old commander, or Blackwater's new monster." Quinn laughed, the sound echoing in the fog. "I'm still a soldier, Rourke, but there's no battlefield left for us, so I made a new one where death and life trade places." He signaled 2 masked figures to bring out a small iron chest, like the one James found. He opened it, revealing old documents in army leather pouches, each stamped U.S. Army Confidential. You want the truth? Here it is. Project Lazarus. James stayed silent, staring. 1943, Quinn began, voice like a lecture. The government launched a classified project, recreating bioenergy from dead tissue. They tested on POWs, then soldiers. When it was scrapped for being unethical, some researchers fled south with the files. They merged experiments with local beliefs, creating the Children of the Serpent. Half science, half religion. They believed souls could store energy, and human blood was the perfect fuel. James smirked. And you joined. Quinn nodded. No, I inherited. Decades later, the military restarted the research in Iraq. They called it psychological warfare revival, using trauma, fear, and faith to control soldiers. I was chosen to lead the test group. The results exceeded expectations. We opened the door they only dreamed of. You're insane, James spat. Maybe, but madness is the price of understanding. Quinn leaned toward Mariah. Her father investigated, nearly exposed the project. We gave him a choice, but he didn't listen. I didn't want to kill him. I needed secret keepers, but he chose wrong. James stepped closer. And now you want me to do what? Be your new secret keeper? No, Rourke, Quinn said, voice softening. I want you to carry on. You're the missing piece. Your blood was there in the project, on the battlefield. You brought it back. Ritual 13 can't be completed without you. What the hell are you talking about? You're a living witness to Lazarus, Quinn whispered. Don't you remember that night in Fallujah, the fuel depot explosion? You should have died with Connor, but you didn't. We call it the Lazarus effect. You were chosen, Rourke. You're proof. James's blood ran cold. Memories of the explosion, white light, then a void flooded back. Quinn spread his arms, firelight glinting in his eyes. Now bring the films. We'll finish it together. The air grew thick. James slowly crouched, as if to remove his backpack. Quinn signaled the two masked figures to approach, but as they crossed the graves, shadows sprang from the left's darkness, charging like an arrow. Its growl erupted, sudden and fierce. The dog slammed into the torchbearer, knocking him down. The torch flying into a puddle, extinguished. The second figure turned, too late to fire as James raised his gun. 2 shots rang out, echoing through the cemetery. Mariah lifted her head, shouting, James, watch out. A bullet whizzed past his shoulder, embedding into a tombstone. James rolled aside, firing 2 more shots. A figure collapsed. Quinn stepped back, raising a hand to signal the others. Don't shoot! Take him alive! But the scene had descended into chaos. Fog swirled. Firelight danced on graves. Gunfire, growls, and shouts blended into a nightmare frenzy. James crawled to Mariah, cutting her ropes. Run! He pulled her behind a large tombstone. Shadow grappled with another figure, teeth clamped on their wrist. Quinn retreated deeper into the mausoleum, the last torchlight casting his face half in shadow, half in light. You still don't understand, he called, voice echoing. You can't kill me, Rourke. I'm already dead. A small explosion rumbled underground, making the earth tremble slightly. James gripped Mariah's shoulder, eyes fixed on the closing mausoleum door. In the flickering light, he saw Quinn's eyes lock onto his and smile. James backed away, pulling Mariah and Shadow with him. Thick fog swallowed the firelight and the cemetery's final screams. He dragged Mariah north, down a path through flooded cypress trees. Shadow ran ahead, paws splashing in mud, breathing heavily. Behind them, muffled pursuit echoed, urgent shouts. Stray bullets striking trees. James fired 2 shots back, just to shake them off. They didn't stop. Rain began to fall, mixing with mud and fog, thickening the air like smoke. When the torchlight behind them faded, James and Mariah veered onto a narrow path where roots twisted like walls. He knew exactly where he was going. The first cabin, where it all began. The map from the old shack showed it sat at the intersection of underground tunnels, linking all of Blackwater. If Ritual 13 existed, its heart lay beneath that house. The cabin loomed through the rain like a ghost, tilted, wood darkened by wet roof leaking in patches. James pushed the door, bolted it, and pulled Mariah inside. Both panted, sweat and rain streaming down their faces. Shadow stood in the room's center, growling softly, ears pointed at a corner of the floor where it had once sniffed a hollow. There, James said. The tunnels below. He knelt, using his folding knife to pry boards. Rain pounded the roof, creaking nails, mixing with their ragged breaths. After minutes, he yanked a board loose. Cold air rushed up, thick with the smell of rotting earth. Mariah shone her flashlight down. A black pit, about 6 feet deep, with rotting wooden steps leading below. "My God," she whispered. James tucked his gun in his belt. "You follow me, Shadow goes first. Whatever's down there we need to know." They descended slowly, steps cautious. Wood creaked, dampness clung. At the bottom, the flashlight revealed a narrow tunnel, low ceiling, clay walls braced with wooden beams and iron sheets. Water dripped from above, echoing like a steady heartbeat. The air was cold and heavy, reeking of rust and decay. They pressed deeper, the tunnel twisting like a maze. Along the walls were niches, each piled high with bones, arms, skulls, legs, mixed with mud. Many skulls bore bullet fractures. Some still wore military dog tags. Mariah turned away, gagging. James knelt, picking up a tag. The light caught the inscription, U.S. Army, C.M. Connor. He stood frozen, throat tight. "They buried us here," he said softly, voice low. "Not just soldiers, but everyone tied to Project Lazarus." They moved on. After several turns, the tunnel opened into a large chamber. High ceiling, cracked concrete walls. In the center stood an old military radio transmitter, 1960s model, antenna wires stretching to the ceiling. Beside it was a metal table, stacked with files, magnetic tapes, and small steel boxes. A flickering bulb overhead cast weak light, meaning someone still powered this place. Mariah approached the table, opening a file box. Yellowed papers, but the text was clear. United States Department of Defense, Project Lazarus, Phase 2, Blackwater Test Site. Her hands shook as she flipped another page. God, they really did this. James grabbed another file. Detailed reports described resonance revival experiments, combining chemicals, radio waves, and spiritual rituals to trigger post-mortem cellular memory. A handwritten note, signed by Major E. Quinn read, Subject 19 showed positive response to 13 Hz frequency signal. Body temperature rose, pupils twitched. Signs of spontaneous neural recovery, more blood needed to sustain energy. James turned another page. A printed list, titled Civilian Donations, Phase 3, detailed dozens of local names, mostly missing without cause. He slammed the file down. They killed civilians, used their blood to feed this experiment. Mariah moved to the radio transmitter. Its metal cover was ajar, light still on. She pressed the headset to her ear. Static crackled, then a distorted voice. Ritual 13, active, maintain containment. Fragmented phrases, looping, like an automated signal from somewhere in the swamp. Someone's still running this, she said. Maybe Quinn. James crouched by the table, spotting a small locked safe. He smashed it with his gun's butt, breaking the hinge. Inside were old photos, soldiers, officials, and in one, a group before a sign, Department of Defense, Division of Experimental Warfare. Front and center was Judge William Crane, accused in a 1970 land corruption scandal. Behind him, a younger Ezra Quinn, no uniform, with a cold smile. Mariah flipped the photo. The back read, Blackwater Facility, July 1969. Lazarus prototype complete. They locked eyes. The cult, the rituals, Project Lazarus, all one entity, government built, then abandoned when it became a monster. A clang echoed from the tunnel's end, metal striking metal. Shadow growled softly. James raised his gun, aiming into the dark. Slow, dragging footsteps approached. Someone's coming, he whispered. They doused the flashlights, hiding behind the table. The ceiling bulb's faint light reflected off the walls, casting a tall, straight-shouldered shadow. Ezra Quinn stepped in, holding a storm lantern. Its glow lit his calm face. I told you, Rourke, he said, voice resonating like metal. You can't escape this place. You're standing in Lazarus's heart. James aimed at his chest. I've seen enough. This isn't research. It's a slaughterhouse. Quinn shrugged. All progress has a cost. They wanted immortality. I gave them a way to never be forgotten. Their blood became this land's memory. And you, he smiled faintly. You're proof Lazarus worked. You're lying. No, you died in Fallujah. James, I brought you back. I made you. And now, you'll help me finish the final ritual. Before James could react, Quinn pressed a control panel by the transmitter. A shrill whine erupted, lights flickering wildly. The tunnel shook, dust raining from above. Run, James yelled. He pulled Mariah and Shadow back as a green light burst from the radio. Radio waves mixed with a low wail, like hundreds of trapped voices. They fled the chamber, heat surging behind. Quinn stood amid the smoke, green light coiling around him, lips muttering ancient words like a prayer. James didn't look back. If Lazarus was waking, the souls buried in Blackwater were about to rise again. An alarm wailed, echoing through the tunnel, blending with the mechanical clank of steel doors opening and closing in the distance. Red lights flashed from ceiling bulbs, illuminating wet clay walls, making handwritten Project Lazarus inscriptions look like bleeding wounds. James pulled Mariah through dust clouds, Shadow leading. Behind, the masked cultist shouts echoed, half prayer, half scream. They're coming, Mariah yelled, glancing back at torchlight moving in the upper tunnel. We won't get far, James said, scanning for cover. They'd passed a wide chamber where the radio transmitter still hummed distorted sounds, electric waves crackling like thunder. He spotted metal pipes along the wall, beside a wooden crate of old tools, picks, shovels, steel spikes, military flares. Here, he knelt, opening the crate, pulling out cylindrical flares, checking their pins. Mariah helped stack them around the tunnel's entrance, forming a crescent. Shadow guarded the entry, growling as footsteps neared. Smoke, mud, and gunpowder thickened the air. James pulled the first flare's pin, red light flaring, sweeping the corridor. Heat hit his face. Get ready, he said softly. A figure emerged through the smoke. Black robe, animal mask, holding a pistol. James fired. The bullet sparked off a steel frame, then pierced the figure's shoulder. They collapsed, but two more surged forward, returning fire. Bullets hit the wall, dirt raining. James rolled aside, grabbed a shovel, and hurled another flare into the group. A small explosion sounded, red fire rising, smoke swirling thickly. Mariah retreated to the control panel, searching for the power system. I can cut the electricity, take their light, she shouted. Do it, James replied, crouching behind an iron beam. He fired two more shots, then lunged, swinging the shovel into an approaching figure. Metal cracked bone, the figure collapsing, mask shattering, revealing a young, vacant face. James hesitated, then spun as another gunshot rang out. Shadow charged, knocking down a third figure, aiming at James's back. A growl mixed with a human scream in the chaos. James saw a blade flash behind Shadow, another figure leaping from the dark. He couldn't turn his gun in time, only shouted, Shadow. The dog reacted instinctively, spinning, jaws clamping the knife wielder's wrist, yanking hard. The blade clattered down. James grabbed it, stabbing back, feeling steel pierce cloth and flesh. The corridor blazed red. A loud explosion sounded as Mariah cut the main power. Flames shot from the fuse box, black smoke flooding. The tunnel shook, dust falling like rain. Go, she yelled. They backed away, but before they could turn, Ezra Quinn appeared through the smoke, eyes glowing in the red light. His uniform was blood-soaked, but he stood firm, holding a pistol. Enough, Rourke, his voice boomed, half human, half metallic echo. You don't understand what you're destroying. Lazarus can do what God cannot. James kept his gun on Quinn's chest. God doesn't need blood to create life. Quinn laughed, blood dripping from his lip. You're wrong. All life needs blood. I just learned how to keep it flowing. He fired. The first bullet grazed James's shoulder. The second shattered a metal panel behind him. James dove aside, rolling through mud, grabbing the last flare and pulling its pin. A blinding white-green light erupted, momentarily blinding the tunnel. Mariah fell. Shadow barked wildly. In the chaos, James fired 2 shots. One hit Quinn's chest. He staggered, stepping back, light revealing a scar from temple to neck. Blood soaked his shirt. He looked down, then up, a twisted smile. "You think bullets can kill what you were made with?" He stumbled, reaching for the humming transmitter. Ritual 13. Commence. James lunged, kicking the gun from Quinn's hand. Quinn swung his other arm, grabbing James, both crashing into watery mud. They grappled, breaths heavy. James summoned strength, punching Quinn's jaw. He fell back, head striking iron, eyes dimming. Shadow approached, blood on its muzzle, whimpering. James pushed himself up, scanning, smoke, fire, and the machine's hum filled the corridor. Mariah crawled over, voice hoarse. "We have to get out. The tunnel's collapsing." James nodded, but glanced at Quinn. He was still breathing faintly. Blood pooled black under the flare's light. James aimed the gun at his head. Their eyes met, former commander, now a madman, believing himself God. "Lazarus will rise," Quinn whispered. Then he passed out. Another explosion came from the transmitter, sparks flying. James pulled Mariah and Shadow, running through choking smoke. They raced through the dust-filled corridor, fire blazing behind. The tunnel shook violently, iron beams clanging down. They reached the wooden steps as a hot smoke plume surged, green light flashing from the tunnel. James glanced back, seeing Quinn's silhouette in the smoke. Hand still reaching for the transmitter, lips muttering otherworldly prayers. "Go," James shouted. Shadow leapt ahead, Mariah close behind. As James hit the final step, the ground shook again. The tunnel behind collapsing, swallowing the red light and the wails of restless souls. James burst from the tunnel with Mariah and Shadow as a hot smoke plume erupted, throwing them onto cold mud. The tremor shook trees around the cabin, ground sinking, heat spreading like a demon's breath. James coughed, lifting his head through the dust. The cabin above was splitting, faint green smoke seeping from floor cracks like toxic blood. Mariah coughed hoarsely, pulling Shadow up. "The tunnel's collapsing. We're out of time." James nodded, staggering up. One last chance. He ran to the cabin's far side, where among old equipment was a portable military radio, antenna extended, buried in scrap. Likely a backup for Project Lazarus, still powered. He grabbed it, wiped off mud, and flipped the switch. The indicator blinked green, then steadied. "God, it still works," he exhaled. Mariah scanned around, gun in hand. "Who are you calling? The whole town's theirs." "Not them," James said curtly. "National Guard. They've got a patrol station 30 miles out. I used this frequency in service." He tuned the dial, static crackling with distorted sounds. He spoke into the mic. "This is James Rourke, former 19th Recon. I'm in Blackwater Swamp, Louisiana. Emergency situation. Need immediate assistance. Repeat. Emergency. Armed attackers coordinates." He read the numbers from his GPS watch. "If received, respond." Only static replied. James held his breath. He repeated. Suddenly, a gravelly voice broke through. "This is Louisiana Air Patrol. Signal faint. Confirm Blackwater." "Yes," James nearly shouted. "Send air support. Illegal armed group. Possible federal crimes. Received. Hold position. Chopper inbound." James lowered the mic, exhaling, sweat cold on his back. Relief lasted seconds. Shouts rose from the forest's edge. Torchlight flared through the fog. They hadn't given up. Mariah turned her gun. "They're coming again. Keep them from the cabin until help arrives." James ran inside, grabbing remaining flares, handing them to her. "We light these, turn this place into a blazing hell." She nodded. Shadow barked as the first black figures emerged from the trees. Water splashed, masked cultists charging, chanting strange prayers. James pulled the first flare's pin, throwing it at the path's edge. A white blaze erupted, red fire reflecting on water, Smoke billowing, Mariah followed, tossing 2 more flares in another direction. The figures halted, shielding eyes. "Shoot!" James yelled. Both fired, bullets tearing through the air, metal clanging sharply in the red glow. The cultist returned fire, bullets hitting the cabin, but the flares exposed them. James reloaded, firing steadily, then heard distant rotors, like heavy drums in the sky. He looked up, through the fog, signal lights blinked. Rescue was coming. "Hear that?" he shouted. "Help's here." Mariah gave a weak smile. Firing. Another flare hit the water's edge, red light blinding the cultists. They panicked, shielding eyes, retreating. Rotors grew louder, wind blasting fog and scattering leaves. One cultist charged, knife flashing. James couldn't turn in time, but Shadow leapt, knocking him down. The blade grazed James's shoulder, tearing his shirt, warm blood spilling. The dog clamped the attacker's wrist, shaking hard, bones snapping. James turned, firing his last bullet, ending him. He knelt, patting Shadow's head. "Good job, old friend." The dog panted, muzzle bloodied, eyes bright. Mariah ran over, pulling him to the porch. "Look!" From afar, a white beam shone from the chopper's belly. Wind whipped water into frothy sprays. A loudspeaker booming, "This is the National Guard. Drop weapons and get down." The masked cultists panicked. Some dropped guns. Others fled into the forest. But amid the chaos, James saw a tall figure stand still. Ezra Quinn. He stepped from the tree line, clutching his chest, blood soaking his shirt, eyes blazing. The chopper's light hit him, half human, half shadow. James raised his gun, but didn't fire. Quinn looked skyward, lips moving in a final prayer. Then he smiled, thin and cold. From his hand, a small device flashed, a signal trigger. He pressed it. The ground shook, small explosions echoing from the tunnel. A green fire plume erupted, lighting the swamp. James yelled, "Get back." He pulled Mariah and Shadow down. A heat wave swept over, dust flying. When the smoke cleared, Quinn was gone. Only a black cloak fragment floated on the water. The chopper lowered, guardsmen deploying, surrounding the area. James lay in the mud, blood seeping from his shoulder, ears ringing from the engines. A hand pulled him up, a voice shouting, "You okay, Mr. Rourke? We got your distress call." He nodded, exhausted but alert. The others? Fled. "We'll sweep the swamp." James looked around, red flares still burning on the water, reflecting in Shadow's eyes. He inhaled deeply, smelling smoke and salt in the wind. Far off, the sky lightened, dawn mixing with smoke in a blood-orange hue. 2 guardsmen lifted him. "He's the one who sent the signal," one shouted over the rotors. They supported his shoulders, helping him stand. James's legs shook. "Where's Mariah?" "Here." She stepped forward, hair wet, face muddy, eyes bright. A medic bandaged James's shoulder, injecting painkiller. "You'll be fine, just muscle tear. Needs stitches at base." He nodded faintly, eyes scanning. Across the way, guardsmen herded surviving cultists into a small group. Less than 10 black robes, masks torn off, revealing vacant faces, muttering nonsense. An officer barked orders, soldiers cuffing them, loading them onto a transport. Mariah gripped James's shoulder, voice low. "Where's Ezra Quinn?" James shook his head, looking at the swamp. Water still simmering from the blast. No body, but he died before the tunnel collapsed. He paused, voice catching. Or something kept him. A soldier approached, gesturing, "Mr. Rourke, we need to evac now. Terrain's unstable, swamp might sink further." James looked at Shadow. The dog whimpered, trying to stand, blood on its leg. He lifted it, slinging it over his shoulder, exhausted but unyielding. "Without him, I'd be dead," he said hoarsely. 2 soldiers helped him to the first chopper. Wind whipped, lights flashed, engines roared. James glanced through the open door. Blackwater swamp sprawled below, vast, dark, but amid it, red flares burned like dying eyes. Mariah sat opposite, bandaged at the wrist. She took his hand, squeezing lightly. We survived. James gave a tired smile, eyes heavy. Just the start. They'll want to bury this. Government, military. But we have proof. He touched his chest pocket, where the remaining files and films were hidden. They can't deny it forever. The chopper lifted, shaking. Below, the swamp was torn into patches, water boiling like rivers of fire. The last soldiers dragged bound cultists, some suddenly screaming, repeating one phrase, "The serpent sleeps, but he will rise again." The chant echoed in the wind until the chopper flew beyond the swamp. James looked down through the window. In the sea of mud, his old cabin sank slowly, roof tilting, then vanishing into the water. A final smoke plume dissolved into fog, leaving faint ripples. Mariah said softly, "I'll never forget this place. No one should remember." James replied, "But someone has to tell." The chopper climbed, the sky opening, and for the first time in days, dawn's light truly touched James's face. He leaned back, closing his eyes. Shadow rested its head on his lap, ears twitching as wind rushed through the open door. The rotors thumped in his chest, steady and deep, like Blackwater's last heartbeat, a land that swallowed countless souls, but finally released 2 survivors. 3 weeks later, Blackwater Swamp, once a buried nightmare, became a national focus. Every morning, newspapers lined stands, military secrets exposed, Project Lazarus no longer a myth. Aerial photos showed massive sinkholes in the swamp, wrecked electronics, human bones, and hundreds of unearthed dog tags. The story of a military cult collaboration, the Children of the Serpent, spread like wildfire. On TV, a Defense Department spokesperson stood at a podium, voice strained but calm. "The government has formed a special committee to investigate Project Lazarus, a real classified project from the 1940s to 1970s, conducted under the guise of biomedical research. Evidence shows parts of the project went rogue, leading to illegal activities. Those responsible will face justice." Millions of Americans watched, transfixed, leaked black and white photos from James's files, masked soldiers, swamp experiments, bodies on metal tables, shocked the public. Major outlets called it the greatest moral wound since Tuskegee. Ezra Quinn, found severely injured near the swamp's edge after the explosion, was charged with 23 counts, including murder, conspiracy to conceal evidence, and violations of federal laws on biological experiments. He was taken to Fort Leavenworth Military Prison, where he remains under medical observation. An officer told reporters, "Quinn seems to believe he's already dead, and that Lazarus is the one living in his body." Meanwhile, Mariah Duplessis became the face of the investigation. On CNN, she appeared in a black suit, eyes tired but resolute. She recounted her father's journey, his unfinished investigation, and how she and James Rourke uncovered evidence in the swamp's heart. The host called her the woman who broke Blackwater's silence. A week later, the president signed an executive order awarding her the Civilian Medal of Courage. When Mariah's name was announced at the Washington ceremony, the audience applauded. She stepped to the podium, voice trembling but clear. "I didn't seek glory. I just wanted my father to rest in peace. And I want people to understand, sometimes, the devil isn't in hell. It's born in well-lit offices and plans stamped classified." In the audience, the seat reserved for James Rourke remained empty. Reporters hunted for him for days, to no avail. They only knew he declined all interviews, left the military hospital after recovering, took shadow, and vanished south. In an editorial, the New York Times wrote, "The man named James Rourke, former Iraq veteran, the first to send a distress signal from Blackwater, chose silence. Perhaps he knows the truth doesn't need a storyteller, only acknowledgement. But in his silence, we hear the echo of conscience." The investigative committee released a report over 300 pages long. Dozens of officials, officers, and researchers were implicated in Project Lazarus across decades. Some were dead, others discharged or prosecuted. Missing locals were identified through dog tags and DNA. A memorial was erected at the swamp's edge, where James's cabin once stood, with a stone plaque inscribed, "For the souls forgotten in the darkness of science and faith." Mariah attended the dedication. As incense smoke rose, she placed a small photo of her father on the plaque and bowed her head. A reporter asked, "What about Rourke? Do you think he'll return?" She smiled faintly, eyes on the water reflecting the sunset. "He doesn't need to come back. He never left. Every gust of wind in this swamp carries his trace, somewhere hundreds of miles west, in a drier, quieter land." James Rourke sat on the porch of a newly built wooden house, an old radio beside him. News of Project Lazarus played on AM, the anchor's voice steady. The scandal is seen as a turning point in military transparency. He switched it off, gazing silently at the sunset. Shadow lay at his feet, head on his knee. "We did it, old friend," James said softly, hand stroking the dog's head. The wind carried the scent of earth, not the swamp's fishy reek, but dry grass, the smell of freedom. Far off, a flock of egrets crossed the sky, white wings flecked with golden dusk. James watched, eyes calm but deep. The look of someone who'd walked through war and darkness and learned, sometimes true victory is a silence that needs no proof. The story of James Rourke and Blackwater is more than a Southern thriller. It touches wounds still raw in American life today. The loneliness of veterans, communities' silence before power, the fragile line between necessary secrets and hidden crimes. The blood-smeared "Don't open the past" on the wooden door encapsulates the "don't stir trouble" mindset of many small towns when power and honor are at stake. But James, Mariah, and Shadow remind us healing doesn't come from forgetting. Specifically, James keeping the 8mm films and Project Lazarus files, sending an SOS via an old radio, and bringing the National Guard to the scene, is a lesson in the value of evidence, discipline, and proper channels. You don't seek justice lone wolf style. You document, preserve, report through the right channels, and find trusted allies. The tomb filled with dog tags and ritual procedures, science, and security, without ethics and civilian oversight, can birth monsters. So in real life, support transparency, protect whistleblowers, and engage in local oversight. For veterans, James shows the bravest act is sometimes seeking help from the VA, comrades, therapy, and continuing to serve the community healthily. He returned to Blackwater to train rescuers, turning an old battlefield into a place of preservation and remembrance. Finally, Shadow, the dog who saved his master mid-stab, is a reminder of small but life-saving loyalty. Build close bonds, care for family, neighbors, even pets. When darkness comes, what keeps us standing isn't immortal myths, but evidence, community, and the dawn we preserve together. If the story of Blackwater Swamp and James Rourke's journey stirred something in your heart, subscribe to the channel to catch more mysterious and human stories where darkness meets light. Thank you for joining us on this journey. See you in the next video, where another American secret will be unveiled.